Hey guys, I'm Tay and I'm an addict.
I'm Steve and I'm an addict.
And this is Chaos and Recovery.
A podcast aimed towards mental health and addiction in a chaotic world. And today, our special guest is Justin.
Hey guys, my name is Justin and I am a person in recovery.
So, me and Justin first met maybe like a little over a year ago at a rehabilitation center. And the conditions at that rehabilitation center weren't ideal for a person trying their best to stay sober. Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah.
It was a big shift in staffing, and it was just very chaotic in there.
Right.
And it just seemed like you weren't an option, or we weren't an option.
Right.
You know, it was just their daily grind, half-ass classes, half-ass counselors. A person who, like me, who's been in a lot of rehabs, like, that was like the worst of the worst. Me and Justin had kitchen jobs together. We had the run of the kitchen for a while. We had... I didn't really like Justin at first.
Same, I didn't like you either.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And I think there was definitely tension there. I think me, more than, I can't speak for you, but like, I think I got over a little bit of that and tried to be, I don't want to say like, try and help you out, but like, I don't know, I felt like I was doing both of us an injustice by just being egotistical and being a hard ass, and like, and going off my first impression of you, like, well, it wasn't fair. I personally want to apologize to that, because when I go into a place like that, there's a lot of fear involved with me. You know, I'm in a very vulnerable place to begin with. I mean, I was coming out of jail, basically, you know, lost both my kids, visitation-wise. There was a lot of things going wrong. And I saw Justin, and he left kind of abruptly from that program.
Yeah, just walked out.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, just walked out. His leather jacket still sitting in the kitchen.
No, Paul took it.
Paul?
Yeah, the boxer, the old man. He's back in prison. He took the leather jacket.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, there were a lot of fun characters in there.
Yeah.
What was your first impression of Steve?
I don't know. I just thought you talked a lot about ego and stuff like that. I didn't even know what the word meant at the time. And, I just remember, like, you used to, like, and in a friendly way, of course, you used to, like, try to pull me aside and tell me stuff, like, you know, good things, like, try to, like, give me direction. Like, I don't know, I just didn't like authority and things like that, you know, like, not like you were trying to be, like, an authoritative figure in my life, you know, I just didn't like when people tried to set me right, you know, and you weren't, like, being hostile to me, you know, I just didn't like direction, I didn't like people, you know, and that was just, like, a problem that I had within myself, you know, and the thing about that place is a very, like, institutionalized, like, rehab. A lot of people are coming out of prison, like, people are being paroled there. People who are just doing, like, 12 years, 20 years, 5 years, a week in prison are being sent there. And, you know, a lot of people were there against their will and against a choice of their own. You know, there was either to stay in prison longer or go to a place like that for 90 days or more and then go back into society, you know. So I was the baby in there. I was the only person even remotely in my 20s.
Absolutely.
You know, and it was just like a very, like, it was almost like a boot camp. You know, you had to be up at a certain time every single day. You had to make your bed. If your wastebasket was a quarter of the way full, like literally a quarter, you'd get a pink slip, which is like a write-up. You had to do your chores. You know, there was no swearing. There was no talking back. And some of the people in there, like the staff members, they were very much on like a power trip, you know, like they would throw away your food if it was like sweating in the fridge, you know. They just completely like, they kind of felt like correctional officers in a rehab.
I was going to say, it sounds more like jail.
Yeah, and I think it's to set you straight a little bit, you know. It definitely set me straight, and not to talk bad, or I'm not talking bad about anyone, but like my roommates, they were people who have killed people before. They were actual murderers. And like, you know, like they told me that I can't brush my teeth in the sink, and I have to brush my teeth over the toilet because that's how they are. Like the bathroom to them, like when they were in prison, like that's like that's like their house, you know. And like I wasn't used to something like that, and I was scared. You know, I'm not used to being afraid of other people, but I like constantly lived in fear. You know, like I always had to make sure my room was tidy, and like they ended up liking me, but still, you know, I didn't like that. And I was in rehab because my family wanted me to go. I had nowhere else to go, you know, so I was there not by a decision of my own. You know, I had nowhere else to go, and that's why I was in there, and that's why I left when it got warm out because I didn't want to be there anymore.
Sure. Where did you go after that?
So what I did is I was in there, and I just remember seeing someone go to a sober house while we were in there, and I saw them just packing up their stuff, and that made me want to go to a sober house. So the next day after that, I was trying to go to a sober house. I kept trying to find one, and I was like, you know what, I couldn't find one, so not even sure what I was doing. I just walked out. I got my phone and I just left. I left all my belongings. I left all my books. I left all my clothes. I left all my shoes. I left everything in my room. And I just walked. And, like, my family lived, like, really close to over there. So, like, I was on something called naltrexone, which is, like, a crave blocker. And I'm, like, Googling on my phone, like, will I get sick if I drink on this? You know? I walked to my mother's house, and my mom lives extremely close to where we were. And, you know, during those days, at those points of times in my life, like, you know, my mom heard me going up the stairs at her house. She was calling the cops, you know, and that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to call the police, but then she called my father. And my father's been sober for 8 years, coming up in September. And my father came there, and they're like, what are you doing here? Like, I was literally, like, grabbing change I had in a jar. Like, oh, I gotta get my stuff. I got this. And, like, grabbing old weed bowls and change and a bunch of old clothes and putting them into, like, a fucking JanSport backpack. And I walked to my friend's house, and I, like, smoked some bud. And I just remember I got, like, so violently high. Like, I was just sitting there, and, like, just, like, the only thing I could feel in here was my heart in my chest. And I was like, I fucked up. I knew I fucked up.
Yeah.
And I ended up moving into my father's house. He told me I can go live with him, and I've been there ever since.
Wow.
That's amazing, dude.
And he's 8 years sober, you said?
He'll be 8 years in September.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how old were you when he got sober?
So, when I was born, a couple years after I was born, my mother told my father he had to stop drinking. I guess he went out on some type of boat party in Newport, and he got drunk and fell off the boat, and some crazy stuff happened.
Wow.
And he ended up getting sober. So, like, my father was initially sober up until I was about 9 years old. And I saw him relapse. And things just kind of went crazy at home, you know. And he stayed that way until I was about 19 years old. Actually, no, I'm sorry. He stayed that way until I was about 17. And then, like, he went to rehab, went to a sober house, and he got, like, seriously back involved in my life when I was about 19 years old. That's where I get those two ages confused. So, like, during, like, my teenage years, my father was not around.
Yeah.
You know, I was seeing my father in places like detox. I was seeing my father in places like, you know, holding centers, rehabs, you know, or he was in jail one time. You know, so, like, there was a good chunk of, like, my teenage life my father wasn't involved. But, like, I'll tell you this much. When my father was sober and I was a kid, I had an amazing life growing up. You know, I won't downplay that for a second. We had all the toys, shoes, video games, fucking jerseys, anything that we ever wanted as children. Like, we had everything. My father was the man. But when I was about 11, like, when they got divorced when I was 9, they tried to get divorced, they got back together, and then they, like, officially got separated and divorced when I was 11. Everything changed.
Yeah.
You know, like, my mom had to foreclose our house. She had, like, 3 jobs. We moved into my grandmother's house, and, like, I had a silver spoon life growing up, and, like, that silver spoon got, like, ripped out of my mouth. It was just, like, confusing, you know. I was a spoiled brat growing up, and to not have that anymore was crazy. Started wearing, like, and one clothes from Walmart, and the kids started, like, making fun of me and shit, you know.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Damn.
Yeah. So that confusion Like, where did that leave you in your teenage years?
So, the confusion, like, in what sense?
Like, as far as, it's a big climate change going from having everything you desire to everything, like, just the bare minimum type of thing. Not... And how, like, were you resentful towards your father? Were you resentful towards your mother? Like, was it a combination?
So, at first, I kind of thought it was cool. Like, I was like, oh, wow, now I have a problem. I can go to school and tell the kids, like, my life is so bad.
Sure.
Like, I'll have all this attention.
Yeah,
Look at me, poor me. My parents are getting divorced.
Yep.
Like, I thought it was, like, a flex. I thought it was so cool.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Like, me before, I would never say something like that, But, like, I try to live an honest life,
Yeah.
And then I'm like, 2 Christmases, 2 birthdays, all this shit, it's cool. But then, like, it wasn't cool because I wasn't getting the 2 Christmases and 2 birthdays. Like, I was getting, like, the 2 Christmases, I'd go see my dad's parents, my grandparents, who were actively always involved in our lives, we try to do things for us and substitute, like, being, like, our father and stuff. But, it was different. But I guess I was kind of upset with my father, because there just comes a time, like, I put my family in this position, like, he was just, like, always disappointing us, getting DUIs, getting arrested, doing crazy stuff, fighting the police, like, dropping us off at the mall when we were kids just to go get drunk and pick us up drunk, a number of different things. But, those resentments, are gone now towards my father. I do steps in, like, a 12-step fellowship, and I learn, like, my part in it, like, why was I upset with my father, and my father has made a living amends in my life. My father lets me live in his house today. My father got me a job opportunity that, like, in all reality, that the money that I make right now, I shouldn't make until, like, 2029. They got me blessed in as a journeyman.
Oh, nice.
Journeyman, and I have the absolute experience and the knowledge of an apprentice,
Yeah.
And they sent me down to the union hall, the laborers union hall, and got me sponsored by my father's company that he works for. And, like, my father's, like, my foreman.
Awesome.
So, like, like, the things that, my father has given me in my life today has corrected those things in the past. My father is a sober man. He's an active, good father, and he gave me tools to a life that I never thought I could dream of building,
Yeah.
How did that how did that relapse affect you when you saw your father go through that?
I didn't know what was going on. Like, I just remember, like, growing up, I would hear my father say things like the kitchen table, like he's going to start drinking again. And I thought he was talking about, like, soda. Like, I could picture, like, Sprites in a cooler. Like, I don't know what's wrong with drinking those things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Swear to God, honest to God, And then he would go to meetings. He's talking about going to meetings. I'm like, holy shit! Like, my dad's an important person.
Boss.
He goes to these meetings every week. Like, he must be, like, a very important person. Oh my God, But then, like, I saw what he, like, I never saw my dad get violent and break things, and the cops come to the house, and I was like, whoa! Like, I was kind of like, it kind of was just like a shock to me. It didn't, like, really, like, affect me in, like, a negative emotional way. It was just like, whoa, I never seen my dad get like this. I didn't know dad was crazy like that.
Yeah,
I didn't really know. Yeah, I didn't know what was going on.
So how was your how was, like, high school life for you, as far as your father was kind of on the outs at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, how was that going through high school without your father being there and, like, dealing with friends and stuff like that? I know for me, in high school, like, I always had to fit in type of thing. And it's like, whoever gave me, the acknowledgement, like, I would hang out with the ghetto kids and then hang out with the hippies. Like, I always had to try and impress everyone, because I just fed off having friends. I thought that was the fucking thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for me, it kind of stemmed from, like, when 8th grade was over in middle school. So, because, like, growing up, honestly, like, I was a skinny kid growing up, but, like, towards the end of elementary school into middle school, I was a big fat kid. And I was a fat kid through all of high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was. I was a big boy.
Yeah.
And all the kids and all the girls were mean to me. I got bullied a lot growing up. And, I was, like, I got like some pretty cruel pranks pulled on me by some girls in 7th grade. Then it happened to me again when I was in high school. You know, like I didn't do anything to anybody, but like to get back in the course of what you asked me, when I was in 8th grade, I started smoking pot.
Yeah.
You know, I never did anything like that before. You know, I just remember it was spring break, which I believe was in April. And I was with some kids at the middle school I went to. We were hanging outside at the field called Parkview Middle School. And we were hanging out over there. And these kids were talking about going on like a magical trip. And I'm like, okay, cool. And like this kid like rolled a blunt that looked like a fucking banana. It was terrible. And like it was great to us, you know. It looked like a fucking professional cigar shop, you know, to us. And I smoked it. And I didn't really inhale it properly, you know. I didn't know how to smoke.
Yeah.
And I was hanging out with this kid named Steven, and Steven was this big, tall kid. He was 6'6" in high school. He was 6'4" in the 8th grade. Like, he was just this big kid, and he was so tough and cool, and, like, I looked up to him like this big brother, and even though I was, like, a little older than him, but, like, you know, he was this big kid. He lost his virginity, and we were in, like, elementary school. Like, he was the fucking man. I was like, whoa, you know? So I started following him, and, like, you know, the summer following into high school, you know, I was smoking pot with him every single day. We were hanging out, like he was having girls sleep over his house, and I was sleeping on the couch, and like, you know, it was so cool. And then we went to a charter school together, and like everyone outside of the charter school before we go in, they were drinking, they were smoking cigarettes, they were smoking pot, and like I wasn't really drinking in high school, but I was smoking pot and smoking cigarettes, you know.
Yeah.
And I kind of just followed this kid around, and we hung out with the bad kids, you know, and I was smoking pot with kids that lived in the West End of Providence, and I started following them. And, you know, I just instantly, like, you know, I started, like, some kids tried to bully me in the beginning of 9th grade, and I got into my first fight, and I won that first fight, which was crazy. And, you know, every year of high school, I got into a fight. You know, I lost some fights, you know. But then, like, you know, I robbed my first drug dealer with my friend Ryan. We robbed this kid Marvin. And we robbed Marvin because I slept over this kid Marvin's house, and he stole my weed in the middle of the night one time. And, like, you know, I felt, like, resentful to him. And we went to go rob him. And that went wrong, you know. And it's just crazy to say that both of those kids from that situation, they both passed away.
Wow.
You know, they both passed away from drugs. And, you know, I just found myself hanging with the wrong crowds throughout high school. And it was more or less like after high school, the alcohol and the drugs started really kicking in when I was about 19 to 20 years old. That's when those things started happening. You know, like my father wasn't around in high school. My uncle was. My uncle lived across the street from my mom's house. My grandfather owned all these places in Cranston because their family came over on a boat from Italy, and they built all these houses in Cranston. And we ended up living over there. And my uncle lived across the street from my mom's house. And my uncle was a heavy pot smoker, and he was a heavy drinker. And when my mom caught me smoking pot, she sent me over there because she thought if I smoked pot with someone in the family and I was doing it with somebody in the family, I'd be safer. And my uncle, like, pretty much, like, raised me. You know, my uncle taught me how to talk to the girls. My uncle taught me how to cut grass. My uncle told me how to use the tools and the ratchets and the screwdrivers in his garage. I would hang out with my uncle. We'd watch all these movies. We'd smoke all this weed. We'd eat all these pizzas. We'd go shovel snow together. Like, my uncle was the man, you know?
Yeah.
And, like, the guidance and the influence I even had at home taught me to smoke pot, to do things like that. Like, those things were normalized. Like, it's not normal for a 14-year-old kid to be smoking pot with his 45-year-old uncle, but I did it every day. You know, that was normalized to me. You know, so that's what I thought. I thought it was all right.
Yeah.
You know? So that's what high school looked like to me.
Yeah.
You know, it was just smoking pot and following kids and doing things that I shouldn't have been doing.
When you moved into your father's house, have you stayed sober the entire time while you've been there?
No, I have not.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so smoking pot and just like, you know, with my uncle and whatnot didn't put me in rehab. You know, I went to rehab before I went to my father's house because I had problems with drugs and alcohol.
Sure.
Right. And, I relapsed a few times living at my father's house, but I've been sober since August 17th of 2024, and coming up this Saturday, God willing, I'll have 9 months.
Wow.
And I did a whole lot of things to get sober and to keep up with the way I am right now. I went to meetings, which could be from NA or AA. I went to 12-step fellowship meetings. I started listening to these people. I started changing my people, places, and things. I couldn't hang out with the same people I was hanging out with. I couldn't hang out in the same areas I was hanging out with. I started hanging out with people who had the same common interest to be sober. I started going to these events and unities that they had. I found young people my age because if I go to like one of these meetings, they so call it, I'd go in, it could be like 8 in the morning, it could be 12 in the afternoon, it could be 6 o'clock at night. And I'm going in there and I'm hearing these people talk, and they're talking about how they got sober in the late 80s, the early 90s, the early 2000s. And like someone who's at the time getting sober, 24 years old, I couldn't identify or relate to any of these people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, holy shit, I'm screwed. I'm going to be fucking drinking decaf coffee and smoking Marlboro Reds and wearing Skechers with a guy named Clifford who's fucking 88 years old. This is my life. I'm fucked.
What's wrong with Skechers?
No, nothing wrong with it, but like, these are the things that I always see. I smoke Newport Reds. I got cigarettes. But, I was like, this is it. Like, I fucked up my life this bad that this is what I'm going to have to do.
Yeah.
But it took a few attempts. I came home and I always had made reservations.
Sure.
Because I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. I told myself at one point in time, I even hear my father say, he's like, you can do anything in this world but drink. So I'm like, okay, so I can do drugs. And I always made the reservation that I'm gonna go home and I'm just gonna smoke pot.
Sure.
But like a person like me, people are like, oh, there's nothing wrong with smoking pot, man. Like, it's perfectly fine, dude. Like, I can't. Like, when I go fucking to the dispensary, I go out in the streets, I buy a bag of bud. Maybe I can smoke that for 2 weeks. But you know what's going to happen? That fucking blunt's going to turn into like a nip or a bottle of Hennessy.
Yeah.
And then when I put that drink to my lips, within a few days, I'll be fucking snorting cocaine in somebody's basement in West Warwick. That's just how fast that progressed.
Yeah.
And I'll be fucking making people try blow before I try because I don't want to die.
Yeah.
I'd rather you die in front of me than me take it and die.
Sure.
So like I'm safety. Like I'm unsafe to myself and I'm unsafe to others. When I'm doing drugs or alcohol. I'm not a good person to be around.
Yeah.
It's not a way of life.
Yeah. And so, like, the person that I met at the rehab that we went to, and the person I saw a couple months ago where you shared your story at a 12-step meeting are two totally different people in my eyes. That person that I met a year and a half ago, it just seemed like you were just running on fear. Running on seeing who would accept me, like always trying to find the negative, and that's what I was for a very long time. I always had to find the negative in everything to get myself out of a rehab or find myself out of recovery because it just wasn't working for me. I know me in early recovery, when I was in my 20s trying to get sober, I had the same thought process. How am I going to sit here with these people who are 50 plus, 60 plus, and listen to their stories? How am I going to meet girls? How am I going to have friends and go do fun stuff? It was so tough for me to try and get sober in the 20s. So, I give you so much credit for doing what you're doing today. And I see you doing so much for your recovery. On Wednesdays, I was doing a big book study with my sponsor, and I would see you at the church, pop in with your sponsor all the time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, fuck yeah, man. like the change that it's happening in both of us. is amazing to see. And it starts with putting the drink and the drug down. But, like, how was your change in changing yourself? How has that process been for you the last couple months?
So, like, I rather, like, go, like, a little further back than that. When I, the person I was a little over a year ago, I was in the same place with you in February of 2024. And, leading up to that, I was a fear-driven person. I was going through a lot of shit, rewind back a little bit, because there's like a few set things that happened to me to go open up these stories. When I talk about that uncle, I found my uncle's body after he committed suicide when I was 20 years old.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, there was another thing that was going on. I was involved in some stuff, and then COVID happened, and like the first girlfriend I ever had left me. All happened in the same month.
Oh, I remember you sharing.
And like, the whole world just fucking changed on me. Like, the girl I loved walked away. The friends I was doing stuff with kicked me out. My uncle, who I looked up to as a mentor, just, like, showed me how to kill himself and just, like, remove yourself like you're a piece of trash in life. And the world shut down. And I was like, holy shit. Well, it's like something picked me up by my ears and dropped me on my head. I was like, what the fuck? Like, holy shit. And I started just going out and drinking all the time and smoking weed. And, I started experimenting with different things like crushing up Adderall and putting it up my nose and, like, army crawling into my mom's couch and stealing her Klonopins while she slept and putting Klonopins inside of blunts. And, I would run around and try different drugs just to put it on my resume. Like, oh, yeah, I did that before. I fucking did that. I did some blow, Like, I wasn't, like, so into it, but, like, I just wanted to say that I did it before.
Yeah.
And I also, I can get addicted to anything. I was addicted to sleeping around with random women. Like that was so cool to me because growing up I was fat and I got skinny and people started thinking I was attractive. And I'm like, I'm just going to go sleep with the girls that used to bully me and take them out of my mom's house. When I done that. Yeah. And, but I wasn't my first rodeo going to that rehab. I've been to rehab so many different times, but it was because, I started acting like a punk at home. The way I would talk to my mother, if you were to talk to my mother like that, I would want to put my hands on you. I'd put holes in my mom's walls. I started getting arrested. I started getting into fights. I started winning fights. I started losing fights, I just found myself drinking against my will when I was about 22 years old, and that's when I went to my first rehab because I walked into somebody's house in the middle of the night. I walked into a stranger's house in the middle of the night where I could have been killed. And then I went to rehab. I got out. I couldn't wait to go do the same things again. I went out, started drinking and smoking and doing all those crazy things again. I went home drunk. My mom caught me. She's like, you're out of here. So I was like, you know what? Screw you. I know everything in the world. I work at McDonald's. I make mad McMoney. So I went and got my last check and I spent it on nips, a 2-liter of soda, 3 packs of cigarettes in a hotel room, and I started calling half the world and talking shit to all my family, my grandmother's, like, completely, like, belligerent and terrible, And the ward police came to the hotel, and I went outside like this, and I lost that fight in, like, 10 seconds, I went to this beautiful drunk tank at Kent County Hospital, and from there I went to another rehab, and, I spent Easters, I spent Thanksgivings, I spent so many holidays in those places, like, I almost get, like, institutionalized in, like, these rehabilitation centers. I get used to going there and not working and getting coffee and cosmetics and food dropped off me. I'm like this big baby that's a grown man. Just get all these things given to me, and I love it. And I can't wait to go back home and do all these crazy things. And it became, like, a vicious cycle in my life. Absolutely. Until all that changed right at the end of 2022. I moved into a sober house in Woonsocket. And, living in Woonsocket, I meet this girl, and, like, she was, like, the Cinderella of Woonsocket. I fell in love with this girl. Like, I'm hanging around her. She had, like, fingernails this big. She was this beautiful girl. I instantly fell in love, and, and, like, I moved into her house within 2 weeks of knowing her. And, like, me looking around her house, I'm like, this is where I'm going to be able to get drunk and do drugs. Like, that's how I viewed it. And I'm getting to know her better, and she's telling me that she's an exotic dancer, and I'm like, that's great. You know, like, what the fuck? I work at McDonald's at the drive-thru window, and I got my neck tattooed, living in her house. I'm thinking I'm the shit, you know, and then like that relationship was probably like the worst decision I ever made in my entire life. Out of all the crazy things I've done, walking into people's houses, doing all these things, you know, because I actually found out the girl who I was dating was a sex worker, you know, and that hurt me. And, you know, I lived off of her. We did a lot of stuff. And, you know, that's where I was getting my income, you could say. And 6 months of me living there, I hated it. You know, I hated every weekend of her going out. I was on anti-abuse. I couldn't drink. You know, I wanted to die at night when she'd be out. I didn't know what's going on with my girlfriend. I don't know who's doing what to her. I don't know what she's doing. I don't know where she is. You know, and those were like some of the darkest days of my life. You know, I'm sitting there smoking pot and I'm looking at prescription pills, like wanting to swallow all of it and kill myself, but I'm too afraid to do that, you know? And it's like, remember, it's like holding myself and looking into like the vanity set, like thinking like, you know, I gotta get out of here, you know? And I got a DUI one night. I crashed my car on the highway. I assaulted a state trooper and I kicked the window out of an ambulance, you know? And that's not what a night drinking is supposed to look like for a 24-year-old man. You know, I'm an alcoholic and I can't drink in safety. You know, I could have killed somebody. How irresponsible and selfish is it to get behind the wheel, you know? And I didn't even know what happened until the next day. You know, one night I was also drinking and got into a fight with her. I grabbed the steak knife and I stabbed the wall, and that knife got stuck in the wall, and I lost 75% of the use of my right hand. You know, I can't use 3 fingers on my hand because of drugs and alcohol. You know, and we went to Aruba at the end of 2023. We went in December, and I remember, like, that was my game plan. I was going to use her and get out of there. You know, and I went to Aruba and anti-abuse. And people that don't know what anti-abuse is, it's something that you can take. It's Delafram, and if you drink on it, you get viciously sick. And I've drank on before it, and it's not a good time.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, you can't even get drunk. Your body rejects the alcohol. Your skin will turn pink. You will throw up violently. Like, for hours, it was terrible.
Is that everything that happened to you?
I did that once. I drank on it. Yeah, it was everything. I had all the symptoms. I thought I was going to die. Yeah. It was terrible. And I went to Aruba and anti-abuse, and I remember I went on an ATV tour around the country, and like I was just talking to the ATV tour guide, and I was just asking him how the drugs are in Aruba. And he was telling me that he had something called pink cocaine. And I'm like, holy shit, pink cocaine. Like, you know, like I've done coke before. But it was like overseas in a different country cocaine. And I did it. And holy shit, you know, like my face like fell off.
New level.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Yep. And I came home with a sweet tooth for cocaine, you know, and that's when I started like doing cocaine all the time, viciously, you know, drinking again, you know, like I just found myself in different addictions that I didn't know I could have. I left that relationship and I jumped into a new addiction of drugs, you know, and right before I met Steve, you know, I was working at Wendy's. I was 137 pounds. My hair was like curling up over my eyes. I was looking terrible. I thought I looked great. And, you know, like one night I was at work and I was doing coke with my manager at Wendy's. And I went across the street. I got a drink. And I went home to her and her boyfriend. And we did like coke all night and all day. And I was up for a couple of days. And I went to one of my ex-girlfriend's houses and drank all her, like, White Claws and acted a fool there. And I went home the next day. I went to go crash out. And my mom called the police on me. And, you know, the cops came and they gave me 2 decisions that I was going to go to the police station and get charged because I had said some crazy stuff on the phone the night before that, or go down to the hospital. I said it to my girlfriend, and my ex-girlfriend, and I said things about my ex-girlfriend to my mom on the phone, and I didn't remember. You know, which it was pretty graphic and violent. Sure. And you know, they told me I can get charged for my homicidal ideations. Or I can go get psych eval at the Rhode Island hospital, and I was like, we're going to go to Rhode Island hospital. I'm not going to jail. And I had 5 different things in my system. I had benzos, I had Adderall, I had cocaine, I had weed, and I had alcohol. And, you know, my mom told me on the phone that, you know, she couldn't afford to love a drug addict.
Wow.
And that hurt.
Yeah.
And I had, my GI was bleeding, my body was failing on me, and I stayed in Rhode Island Hospital under psych and medical care for 5 days. I went to a detox center, and then I ended up in rehab with Steve. And I did not want to be there, you know, and, you know, I just recognized, you know, I always thought I was such a bad person, but I was just a sick kid that went through a lot of shit, and I dealt with it in bad ways.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, so to get more back on track, you know, of where I came from to where I am now, you know, like I didn't stay sober initially and I went back to my father's house. I messed up a few times. And one night I messed up pretty bad, you know, I stole some kid's wallet at Oakland Beach and I tried to help him find it. We got into a fist fight over it. One of us got the upper hand, and one of us getting the upper hand led to getting jumped by a few people.
Yeah.
You know, and I just remember laying on a gurney in Kent Hospital looking at the ceiling, and I was like, God, I'm going to die young. I don't want to die young. Please help me. You know, I'm going to die. I'm going to keep living like this. I'm going to die. You know, there was a point where my mother even told me on the phone that we're all preparing for you to die.
Yeah.
And we can't afford to bury you, so we'll have to cremate you. And this is who's going to get this and who's going to get that of your body in a urn, whatever. And I was pissed at my mom, you know, because my mom was right. I was all right with living fast and dying young already, you know. But then I started realizing, you know, I'm somebody's son. I'm somebody's grandson. I'm somebody's brother, you know. And I needed to want this for myself. I never wanted it for myself. I had to do this so the workplace could be happy. I got to do this so I can live back at my mom's house. You know, I got to do this so I can save this relationship. You know, and it was then I realized, you know, like I always knew I was an alcoholic and a drug addict, but like I didn't care, you know. But then I realized that this is no way of life, you know. So that's when I started going to these meetings, and I started meeting these people, and I started getting involved with like young people's 12-step fellowships. You know, I started hanging out with these people. I started going to these 12-step conferences they have all over the country. I got a sponsor. I started listening to that sponsor. I started listening to people at these meetings. I found a higher power that's greater than myself, which isn't a woman, which isn't a vehicle, which isn't cash. You know, it's something that I know that's out there that's greater than myself that I can talk to. And if I meditate, it talks to me. You know, I got my life back on track. I'm not that 137-pound kid that's working at Wendy's putting all these drugs up his nose. You know, I'm healthy now. I got a good job today. I got my license back. I bought myself a car. You know, I did meet somebody, which they like, you know, they say don't meet somebody in your first year. I met somebody. I'm in a long-distance relationship with somebody I met at one of these conferences. You know, we see each other on the weekends. We have our separate recoveries. You know, all the things I do today are the things that benefit myself in a positive way. You know, I seek outside help. You know, I'm on medication. I have a therapist. I have, you know, you can say a home group of one of these 12-step fellowships. You know, I got a position there. I got a position in a few service committees in the state of Rhode Island. You know, I go to detox centers regularly and talk to people because I need that reminder of where I could be. You know, like I tell these people when I go there, I'm one bad decision from being where you guys are. I'm just a couple of good decisions of being on the other side of the table right now. You know, so, yeah, you know, I will see people who I used to hang out with, and I'll say hi and bye real quick and keep going with my day. You know, I lived a wild life young, you know, and I'm all right with my boring little average nice life, you know. Yeah. So, you know, there's just a lot of things that I had to do, and like, you know, it's just crazy. You know, I've seen friends die. You know, like someone that me and Steve know just passed away yesterday. I wasn't the friendliest with the person, you know, but me and that person had the same thing that we all have right now.
Sure.
You know, I've seen friends die. I've had family die from this, you know, and I was born with a disease I didn't ask for, but I asked for help with it along the way. And it took me 4.5 years just to see that it's just one day at a time.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't have to die today. Like, just for today. You know, I can't speak for tomorrow, and I can't speak for yesterday because one of those are gone, and one of those I'm not promised. You know, I'm just living in the present moment.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I was gonna ask 2 more questions, but I don't even. He just pretty much summed it all up. I love it.
I want to know. I want to know, how is it being in a relationship with somebody in recovery also?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like how has that been going? And also, like, how is the long distance thing? How, coming from, I mean, as far as that goes, like, I haven't had many good non-toxic relationships outside of recovery.
Right.
You know? So how has that been going for you?
So it's been a good relationship. You know, we're both happy. So there's pros and cons, you know, to a long distance, you know.
Yeah.
She just celebrated a year in August. I'm sorry, she just celebrated a year in April.
Oh,
and
awesome.
we met back at the end of November, and we started talking in December. You know, so the good things about it is that we have our time to focus on ourselves during the week. You know, I work my program, she works her program.
Sure.
I have time to focus on my job, she can focus on her job. We can have the honeymoon phase like last a little longer because we see each other only on the weekends. You know, we still communicate, we still talk on the phone. You know, and I'm also somebody that enjoys my space. You know, I like to screw off in the world and sit in my room and listen to music and play some video games and watch some movies. You know, and we're 2 different people for sure. You know, we both have the same higher power, which isn't, you know, it's not required to have a religion-based thing, but, you know, we both believe in God.
Yeah.
You know, we've done enough of the steps to understand, you know, our faults and have some relationship and sex ideals and those types of nature, you know. And, you know, we've had some arguments, but they're healthy arguments. You know, we find a way through it. We don't get vicious with each other. We don't go to bed angry at each other, you know. Like, it can get tricky dating somebody in recovery, you know. Like, one time we didn't agree on something, and she told me to keep coming, and I was like, don't you ever say that shit to me again. You know, and I was, like, upset with that. I was like, who are you?
Ego steps in. Why? Because you're only a couple months. You're only a couple months older than me, and now you're throwing some. Yeah, that's tough, but that sounds really.
Sounds nice though.
It sounds healthy.
It sounds healthy.
It is healthy.
Yeah, because I always picture long distance relationships as so many different obstacles to deal with, but when you frame it in that way, as far as, you know, you both get your time together, away from each other, and then when you get together, it is like the honeymoon because you're not really like seeing each other that much. But you both going through are you both currently going through the steps?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, life changed for me when I started the steps. And I started the steps with a few sponsors, never got past 4, so I never really did any work. The sponsor I have now, who has literally been helping me change my life through the process of going through the steps. We're at step 9 right now, and 4, 5, and 6, and 7 were monumental for me. I didn't realize how much effect I made resentment my issue at all times. I always conjured up these resentments and always blew them up. I didn't realize I had to take a step back and look at my stance in that resentment, or what I was doing, what I was involving myself in that resentment. And it's been such an eye-opening process for me. And I think I've missed that in so many years trying to get sober because I was always just worried about putting down the drink and the drug. If I can put that down, I think I'm a pretty decent person, you know? But I didn't understand that the real work starts after I put down the drink and the drug. And I'm able to start looking at myself with cleaner lenses and having another person walk through it with me, which that was another tough thing for me too. Listening to another person give me constructive criticism and tell me exactly how to live my life, so to speak, because I had no clue. I had no clue how to pay bills. I had no clue how to talk to women. I had no clue how to talk to my parents the right way or talk to another human being without being so judgmental and so fogged up, because I never cared about the growth in my life. You know? Do you mind me asking what step you're on right now?
So, I recently had gotten a new sponsor a few months ago. You know, the furthest I've ever gone to the steps, I've gone up to step 8. You know, I've done 5th step, and you know, there is someone out there who knows my deepest, darkest secrets, which I was like so afraid to unravel. You know, but I told someone that. You know, so right now I'm currently on my 4th step again. Yeah. And you know, my first 4th step, I sat every night, wrote through it, went far back into my childhood, teenage years, young adult, present moment at those times, you know, and wrote those down on a piece of paper, wrote what it affected, and, you know, the cause, why I was resentful, you know. So I'm on a new 4th step, but, like, you know, I had, like, about a little over 100 people, places, and things, and you know, resentment. That's great. My 4th step, and, like, you know, so my new one, it doesn't have that much. It's kind of like a medium size, you know, there's like 40 things, like, with people, places on them. And, you know, because some of the things that I did go over, I feel at peace with. You know, I can think about this person that I had resentment towards, and I know my part in it, you know, and I'm at peace with that situation, you know. So I'm on a 4th step, you know. And when I went to go find my sponsor, you know, I didn't find this person because I wanted his wife. I didn't want his car. I didn't want what was in his pocket, you know. I wanted what this person had spiritually, and I wanted this person's freedom and their joy. You know, I wanted to know why this person was so happy and free, and how they're so peaceful in the way they hold themselves, like an adult should, you know, like a way a man should. And I admired that, you know. And I asked that person to be my sponsor, you know, and they take me through these steps with them. I don't go through this alone. I don't find one of these 12-step books and go through it myself and read it myself, you know. I read it with another person, and I do this work with another person. That's such a big thing, you know. So I'm on a 4th step again, you know, and I can actually understand these things, you know. Like, I started doing them again when I had about a little bit before of 6 months, so I was about like 5 months and a couple weeks sober. And, like, I was reading these things with my sponsor, and, like, it started actually, like, connecting with my brain. I was actually able to understand it and, like, absorb this information like a sponge, you know. Because before, I'd just go in one ear and out the other. I didn't care. I didn't really understand. But now I'm able to sit there and understand, you know. I have an allergy to alcohol. You know, people could think, oh, addiction and, you know, alcoholism, those aren't diseases. Well, you know, they are. You know, it's a chronic brain disorder. You know, I can't drink like other people. You know, like, same thing with snacks. I can't just have one little chocolate cake. I gotta have the whole fucking box. You know, I can't just watch the Red Sox and not buy a shirt. I gotta buy all the jerseys. And the next day I can give a shit about the Red Sox. You know, like, I have a problem. Sure. It could be women, it could be scratch tickets, it could be video games, it could be anything. And, like, today I have control. Yeah. You know, because I never had control. Drugs were my master. Alcohol was my master. Anything was my master, and I was a slave to it for years. And it almost costed me my life. I almost paid the price of my life with it. You know, so that's why, you know, I take these things seriously. You know, for me, I'll be quite honest. You know, this is just me, and this is how it worked for me, and this is just my opinions. You know, the steps aren't what changed my life. They're not what are changing my life. It's how I'm changing my life. You know, they say these things are programs of action. You know, it's not about what I know, it's about what I do. You know, they say meeting makers make it. I don't hang out with the same people. I have a set schedule and a routine in my life. You know, the steps don't do all that for me. Yeah, I am actively doing the steps, but I don't think the steps will just change you. I think more than just the steps can change you. Your higher power, the way you carry yourself, the way you present yourself, the things you do, the people you hang with, you know. You can do the steps and still go back to your old hangout spots and hang out with those people and still act like a punk and a scumbag, you know, because, you know, I've done that before. I don't hang out with those people. You are who you hang with. You know, you hang out with people of success. You hang out with people who follow higher powers. You hang out with people who are commonly good to people, you know, honest people. You're going to be those category of people. You can do all these steps. You can do all those things and still not be a good person. You know, there's people who have been sober for 30 years and they're still spiritually sick.
Yeah.
You see it all the time.
You know, so, you know, that's just my opinion. You know, I get it. People are like, these steps are a matter of life and death. You know, I don't think they are. I think there's other work you can do outside of the steps to change your life.
Yeah. I completely agree.
You know what I'm saying?
I think the culmination of everything needs to be present. Mm-hmm. You know, in order to grow in your life, it's not just, you can't just do one thing. It's what I was trying to say. For me, I just can't go to meetings and stay sober.
Right.
I can't go to meetings and not have a sponsor and stay sober. I can't just have a sponsor and stay sober. I need connection in that group. I need a job in that group. For me, I need everything that's suggested of me to grow as a person. And forever, I tried to micromanage my recovery the way I saw fit. I'll go to one meeting a week. That'll be enough. That'll get people off my back. I'll be fine, you know. And I've proven it time and time again with relapse after relapse after relapses that, you know, I can't do this by myself. I do need those connections, those new people that I meet, those people that I look up to and want what they have type of attitude. And for me, it's taken me so long and so much pain to get to where I'm at, to the point where when I finally found those people that I respect and finally started seeing the person I respect inside of me, is when I never wanted to go back to a drink and a drug. And it's taken me so long to get that, so many attempts. And look, if I don't stop doing what I'm doing, I can quickly have that all reversed inside my mind and think a drink and a drug is the best thing for me. You know? So I have to be active in all of these things that are suggested of me.
Absolutely.
You know, and I want to ask you, like, what do you do outside of recovery, like, for your own self-care stuff?
Like hobby-wise?
Like hobby-wise, like, I mean, for me, I do some yoga here and there. I go to, I do, like, Reiki sessions sometimes, like, things like that.
Okay. Well, for me, it's pretty average and pretty boring. I like to play video games.
Yeah.
You know, I recently got back into that. I like cinema. Okay. I like to watch horror movies. I like to watch older movies. I like to watch documentaries. You know, because one thing they say about recovery is that you do recovery so you can have a life. You can't make recovery your life.
Sure.
You know, because I did make recovery my life. And I'm learning how to have a life outside of that. Because I was going to meetings every single day, sometimes 2 meetings for like 7 months.
Yeah.
You know, like that's all I did. All I did was go to meetings, and go to fellowship, unity, and like all these events. And like that's all I was doing. And like, you know, I found myself like feeling pretty bad for myself. Like, wow, like, you know, like this is all I have to look forward to, which is great. You know, if that's what you do, that's amazing, you know, because that's what worked for me. You know, I held on to these new friends. I had it close, but I held on to my seat even closer, you know, but I was afraid to lose it, you know, but like I started realizing that, you know, I have to have some type of life for myself. You know, I have to start enjoying some things of life, you know, and that's what I like to do. I like to play my little video games. I like to watch my movies, and like, that's just about it, you know.
Yeah.
I was going to the gym before, but I also do construction, you know, so like my body was like, I couldn't do both, you know. You know, I used to like reading books. I like superheroes. I'll keep up with like those things, but like, you know, I don't go for jogs. I really love music too. I forgot to mention that. I'm big on listening to music. I like to sit there and connect with music. So like almost as like all electronic, music, video games, and movies. And like, I'm not someone that likes to fish. I don't find joy in that stuff. I don't find joy in sports and playing baseball and shit like that. It's just everyone has their own thing.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be opposed to maybe learning something like martial arts. Maybe learning a new fighting style, or like learning a new language. But those things will come when they can. Like when you're talking about these things that like recovery has given you, I kind of forgot a little bit of what you said, but I'm financially responsible. You talk about like paying bills. You didn't know how to do things like that before, I just started a credit score for myself a few months ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank God, when I was out there doing drugs and drinking, I never opened up a credit card. I just started, and I'm like putting away the money that I make. I put away 3/4 of what I make every week.
Nice.
I do that. I bought a car. I have goals. Like I want to get my own place. I wanted to get my own place in July and move my girlfriend from up north down here to the south of Rhode Island with us. But I have a sponsor, and I told my sponsor that. And my sponsor, he knew that for a little while. And we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. He's like, listen, these are just suggestions. You don't have to take my advice. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I would wait till you have a year sober to do something like that. Until you're at least at your 9th step.
Sure.
And in my head, I'm like, screw this guy. Who the hell is this guy telling me I can go buy an apartment right now? I have the funding to do it. But you know what? Whatever worked tonight, did it Justin's way. When I would listen to myself, like, yeah, I'm going to go do that. Yeah, I get arrested. Oh, yeah, I'm sober, so I can go buy my own apartment. And I can get drunk in my own apartment just as much as I can get drunk anywhere else,
Absolutely.
So if I ask this person to be my sponsor because I want what he has, what good am I doing to myself if I'm not going to take this gentleman's advice?
Yeah.
So I listened to this person. And, I also did it because it hurts. I'm in a long-distance relationship. I told you all the good things, but there are some things that suck. Like, I hate that I look forward to the weekends. We only get 2 nights to be with each other, and then, like, that gets ripped away from me when I have to go home on a Sunday night or she has to leave, and then, like, sometimes I'm lonely during the week. That's my person. So, like, I just want to move her down here, but, like, good things come with time. And I took my sponsor's advice, so I'm going to wait until, at least when I have a year, or maybe in September or October, I will get my own place. I'll have a lot more money to bring with me. I not to brag or boast, but I do fairly well for myself, with my line of work and the money I make. I could have gotten a place, but I'm going to listen to this person because I asked them to be my sponsor. I look up to them. I could have easily go against advice. I've always went against advice. And, the things that I do today are working for me, so why not continue to do them?
Well,
Good for you, man.
Thanks, man.
It takes a lot to swallow our pride and shut our ego up and get advice from people that have been through these type of situations before. These people aren't giving us suggestions because they want to dictate what we do in our lives. They're not trying to be controlling. They're trying to be helpful.
Right.
And I know for me, I didn't think people could be helpful. It's always a back fucking thing that they wanted inside of it. It had to be something like that. But for me, it was very nice, and it was like a weight off my shoulder listening to somebody and running everything through them and then listening. Because I didn't have to make the decisions anymore.
Right.
I have the choice to, but if I put all the trust in this one person that I asked to be my sponsor, like, I need to be all in. And I was never all in with any sponsor before the one I have now. It's been great.
I love that for you.
Yeah.
You want to know something cool, too? The thing that's funny is that my sponsor met his now wife the same way I met my girlfriend.
Oh.
They were in a long-distance relationship for 4 years. And now they live together here in Rhode Island, and they're married, and they're expecting a child.
Wow.
And, like, that's how their life worked for them, Like, and I kind of knew that before I asked me. I knew because I went to their wedding in Long Island last year. You know, he lived in Long Island, she lived here in Rhode Island, and they met at one of these 12-step fellowship events. And that's how they became a couple. You know, there was times where she was in school, they could only see each other once a month, and they made it work.
Yeah.
You know, and they live together now, and they're happy. And like I see them, they have such like a healthy marriage, and like you know, and I'm hoping that could be us. You know, but like this one day at a time. Like with my recovery, I do with my relationship, like I do with my job. You know, it's like that one day at a time is such a good mindset you could bring into anything in your life. You could bring that into a job, but you don't know what's going on. Because I'll tell you, I don't know shit sometimes. I'm just standing there with a tool in my hand. You know, and I don't know a lot of what's going on. These people, they're like 60 years old with bear guts running circles around me. Like, they've been doing this. They do this, you know? Yeah. And, you know, they know that I'm willing to learn, you know? Because, like, I have a future in my career, you know? Like, they want to put me in the heavy operators union next year, which is, like, phenomenal. They want to make me a foreman within a couple of years because my father has such a strong relationship with the owner. My father's been at this company for almost 40 years, and the owner has a son that's my age, and he wants to step down eventually, and he wants to give his son the chair of the company, and they want what my father and him are for me and his son to be one day. That's awesome. You know, they have that, like, they project this, like, future at work, and they want me to be a part of that. You know, I have a very promising career opportunity, you know, and I wanted to try to be a better worker. You know, I started going to work an hour early every day. I started listening. I started heading back 5 minutes early from coffee break. I started heading back 10 minutes early for lunch. Sure. People might be like, what does that have to do with recovery? Dude, if I wasn't sober, I couldn't do shit like that. Yeah. I couldn't, you know? And, like, everything happens for a reason, I like to think, you know? Because if I got this job opportunity last year, I would have fucked it up. Yeah. You know, like, there's nothing wrong with working in a fast food establishment, but that's what I was before. I was a cokehead working at a Wendy's, so I was killing it, but I was killing myself. And I never thought that I would be giving myself more life every single day, you know? And, like, my life's gotten nothing but better ever since I started listening. You know, like, I've had to humble myself and my ego, you know. I thought I knew everything. Like, dude, I'm a 25-year-old kid. You know, I'm a man, you know, but, like, I can act like a kid sometimes, you know. And I have outside issues from alcoholism and addiction. You know, I suffer from road rage. I have a problem with that. You know, I can jump out of my car and get shot and killed for the way I act. I have a serious problem with that. So, you know what I do? I put my seatbelt on, and I drive the speed limit, and I let people go when I go by them. I let them pull out in front of me. I try not to get serious upset with them, you know, because I'm not sure if you guys ever heard, but there was a fucking priest who killed somebody with a bow and arrow before in a road rage. Have you heard about that? Yeah, it's true. You know, like, yeah, man. I'm someone's kid at the end of the day. How crazy would it be for my mom to hear that your son got his head blown off because he jumped out of his car and tried to fight someone else, like a retired FBI agent? You don't know what you're fucking with, you know? So, like, I can apply these principles to anything in my life. You know, like, just for today, I'm going to drive safe and, you know, be a functioning member of society, you know, because when I go around my family, when I go to events, I'm not just the sober drug addict and alcoholic. I'm a fucking functioning member of society. Yeah. I put into the system. I don't put my body into the system anymore. Yeah. I put my money into it. I put my time into it. I put my dignity into it. I put my integrity. You know, it's about doing the right things when no one's even looking. I work with integrity. You know, I try to perform my daily duties with integrity. You know, like, it's all around. You could be a better person if you do a program of action. Yeah. You know, my life didn't just get better one day. It took time, and it took a lot of things and a lot of suggestions and a lot of advice, you know. And, you know, when you hear these people say, too, like, you know, the 90 meetings for 90 days, it's not for these 12-step fellowships to put a big gap-sized hole in your head to cram all this information in it. It's for you could find your tribe of people. It's for you could find your home group. It's for you could find your set meetings, you know, have a routine, because that's what I have. Monday night, I go to my home group. I do step work with my sponsor before that. Tuesday, my buy day is take time to myself. Wednesday, I go to a big book study. I find a little bit more about the literature for the fellowship I'm a part of. Thursday nights, I go to my therapist. Friday night, I go to, like, my favorite home group. You know, I walk into that place and, like, I feel like I'm at home. I see these people I love. I see these people I feel comfortable with, you know. And on Sundays, the way I connect with my higher power, and, you know, I attend church, I sing to my higher power, I love my higher power, I try to live life by that, you know, and then I repeat, you know, I go to work, I wake up at 5:30 in the morning, I'm at bed by 10:30, 11 o'clock, you know, at night, praying and waking up and, you know, doing my duties, you know, like, I found the things that work for me. What may work for me may not work for Steve, you know, what may work for Steve may not work for me. You know, I found things that I'm comfortable with, you know, because, like, I was just, like, honestly, like, you know, I wasn't a tough person, but I was a violent, disturbed person.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't, like, this crazy macho man, you know, but I was a violent person. I'd break things that hurt people and stuff like that. If a piece of shit, like, the way I was before, like, yeah, you know, we're not bad people, we're sick, but I did fucking bad things when I was sick, you know. If someone like me could do these things and change my life around, anybody can. I'm, like, literally convinced, because I thought there was no way that I wasn't just going to stop drinking. I'm at least always going to smoke a pot.
Of course.
And I haven't put a fucking blunt to my lips in almost 9 months. That's insane. It's insane. Like, that was my baby. I had to throw my baby away.
Yeah.
You know, and that sucked big time. Like, early recovery is hard as fuck. It is very hard.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow. You know, I love, you know, I haven't known you for too long, but I'll say it again. I love the transformation and watching people start to grow into the person they want to be in life. You know, and I do a lot of in like deep talking with my sister about, you know, I'm very close with my sister, but like we both struggle from two different things, but the pain is just the same. And I think that's always remains like a very upfront thing for me about dealing or talking with other humans about any type of their pain. And like how we can always find a commonality in people that are just willing to open up and grow and talk about the vulnerable things. And because I love listening to the vulnerable things. That's what makes me excited in seeing other humans want to talk about those things, you know, because I was always afraid to talk about those things. And I always thought I had to hide those things because if I talked about them, I was weak in the back of my mind. So it's amazing to watch you doing what you're doing today. It's a complete, for me, change from the person I met a year and a half ago. And I want to give you so much credit. And I want to thank you for coming on today, man. I mean, this meant everything to us. I mean, we love this type of thing.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on, man.
Well, of course, thank you. You know, I'm giving myself any credit. You know, I don't want to inflate my ego or anything. You know, that's work isn't a thanks to me. It's a thanks to God, which is my higher power. It's a thanks to a 12-step fellowship. It's a thanks to the things that I listen to. It's a thanks to the things I attend to. You know, I just got to remember at the end of the day, like, I may be a changing person, but I'm not a completely changed person. You know, I'm still changing. You know, I can recognize and humbly say, you know, I am a little different than what I used to be. You know, I can recognize the calmness. I can recognize that I listen to people. You know, I don't have arguments with people anymore.
Sure.
I don't like negativity. You know, I fought for years, you know, like, people say, like, they had a monkey on their back from disease. I had a fucking full-blown silver gorilla on my back.
Yeah.
I really did, you know, and, like, I minimized that. Like, I got rid of that gorilla on my back, you know, and I didn't do this thing alone.
Yeah.
You know, and it was so nice to see you. I was relieved to see you. I low-key saw you at the back of that meeting I spoke to.
Oh, you did?
I did. You were sitting next to your sponsor in the back, in the back of the corner near the door.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, this guy can hear me speak tonight. You know, I wonder if he thinks I've been sober since the last night. You know? And I remember I saw you doing step work at that church, and I knew I'm good with faces. Like, that's fucking Steve.
Yeah.
You know? And I didn't think you were going to recognize me because I was looking skinny. My hair was like so long before, you know, I look different now.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it was so cool. I remember, like, seeing you on Monday night, and I was officially, like, went up to you and hugged you. Like, I was so happy to see you, you know, because so people we were at that rehab, they died.
Yeah.
Nick passed away.
Yep.
You know, and, like,
Yep.
One thing I want to, if we're gonna wrap it up, one thing I want to say, like, how old are you?
37.
37. So I think your day of doing drugs, baby, was what, in the 90s?
No.
Early 2000s?
Yeah, late. Yeah, 2000s.
I feel like, maybe more of that time the drugs you were getting were drugs. Heroin was heroin, coke was coke, meth was meth. Today, that's not the case.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Nothing is what you think it is, I'm at an age of where, when I was 16 years old, kids were dying from what they thought was doing coke in high schools, in the last 5 years, it's insane to say I've known over 30 people who have died from fentanyl.
Sure.
Kids who I went to high school with,
Wow.
That shit's just wiping people out, and it's just so sad. You never know what you're even doing today. And, all of us here, if you guys identify as addicts, we've all done something that could have completely fucking killed us at one point in time. Like, we're survivors.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one thing you can say confidently without, being like big-headed. We're survivors. We survived something, we fucking fight a war every single day. We fight something you can't see, and like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It can get draining, and that's why I don't do it alone. I have a fucking room of people to hold me up and to do it with,
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure for you to come and ask me to speak on air. It was awesome. I've never done something like this, and what an honor, and I appreciate you guys so much, so thank you.
Justin, thank you so much for coming on. I didn't know a ton about you, and I love everything about you. I think your vibe is so cool. I could sit and talk to you for hours. I love hearing new people's stories. Like, there's stories that I haven't heard before, because no matter how different they are, I can still relate to something. And I honestly just can't wait to get to know you even more. I'm so glad that we get to see each other weekly.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you so much for coming on, sharing your experience, your hope, and everything. And I look forward to getting to know you more.
Yeah, same here.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.